Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
Abercrombie Kids is bringing the cheer all holiday season. And winter break means it's time for new outfits that are both festive and comfy. The last thing they need? New cozy coats for every occasion. Celebrate the season with Abercrombie Kids in the app, online, and in stores.
I am Nicole Khalil, and on this episode of This Is Woman's Work, we're going to cover a topic that I don't want to talk about, and you probably don't want to hear about. Bet you're excited to hit play for this one, right? Okay, that might not be the best way to kick off an episode, but it's the truth, because we're going to talk about death. And I know just hearing the word makes most of us want to change the subject, stick our fingers in our ears, or scroll Instagram until we find a cute dog video to distract us. But here's the thing. Death isn't something any of us can avoid. No matter how many things we think we can learn from the blue zones, no matter how much anti-aging methods we employ, or how many medical advancements we make. It's the one certainty that we all have. We just may not know the when or the how, only that it will happen. So why are we so bad at talking about this inevitable thing? More importantly, in our avoidance, are we missing out on the lessons that death can teach us about how to truly live? So today, with some discomfort on my part, we're diving into how to have what our guest calls a good death. I think I have an idea of what that might mean, and I'm assuming it's not about avoiding the inevitable, but embracing it in a way that brings peace, purpose, and maybe even some perspective. But my ideas about this topic are all conceptual because I've been fortunate to not have experienced death at a deeply personal level yet in my life. And yet I know it's coming because, again, death is a certainty of living. To guide us through this topic is someone who's not just comfortable talking about death, she's spent her life working to make it better for everyone. Suzanne B. O'Brien, RN, is the founder and CEO of Doula Givers Institute and has been at the bedside of more than 1,000 end-of-life patients as a hospice and oncology nurse. She's taken those deeply human experiences and turned them into a mission to provide high-quality end-of-life education and care to patients and families worldwide. Oprah Magazine named her a humanitarian ambassador for her work, and she's here to share insights from her new book, The Good Death, Supporting Your Loved One Through the End of Life. Suzanne, thank you for being our guest and for talking, well, I'm going to speak for myself, about an uncomfortable topic that is so important. So I'd love to start by asking, based on your experience, should we be talking about death more? Are we missing things by avoiding it?
1,000%. So if I may, and I know this might be a spoiler alert for the episode, but when you talk about death, you're talking about life because they're not exclusive of one another. And the minute that I started working with those at the end of life, my whole life changed in the best way possible. And we can dive deeper into that as we go on this episode. But to answer the first question is absolutely.
So that was something that I was thinking going into this conversation, given your experiences. God, it sounds so heavy, sitting at the bedside of over 1,000 deaths. I would imagine that there is a heaviness, a sadness, a hard element of that. And yet it's obviously given you so much good. How do you handle that paradox?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me, Nicole. And I love your podcast because, it's time for the female energy to step forward. And how we do that is listening to our heart individually and then collectively for the world. And that's how I found myself working with those at the end of life, because I finally started listening to this calling that I had. I had no end of life experience and I was being called to go to hospice as a nurse. And it didn't make any analytical sense. And the minute I did that, I knew that that's how life works, is following your intuition, following your calling. And yeah, there were very hard end of lives. And I'll tell you why they were hard. First of all, it's always going to be difficult to say goodbye to someone physically in this form that we love. That's just part of it. But it's 1,000 times, if not 10,000 times more difficult today because we don't acknowledge that death is a part of the existence. So when it does show up, it's like this crisis for everyone. So I was seeing and am still seeing a lot of end of life that are really challenging that shouldn't have that added stress to it. Now, at the same time, I would see occasionally back in the beginning, an end of life that was beautiful, something that happened that was so connected. And I thought, if people could see that, if they knew end of life could be like that, they would never be afraid. So I'm going to tell them.
Okay. I couldn't agree more with the concept of following your intuition and trusting yourself. So thank you for being an example of that. And I have so many questions about those experiences, but I want to start with first something that I saw you had said in my preparation for our conversation. And that is what all people, regardless of age, religion, or culture, realize at the end of death. What is that?
Okay. So now I've been honored to work with people all around the world and in different cultures and religions. Why? Because end of life touches us all, right? So one of the things in our just bringing that back to how much more similar we are than different, super important, right? That death teaches us that. But what was happening is that there was a certain point in the end of life journey where I call almost people get what I call their spiritual eyes. So it's almost as if they have one foot in this world and one foot in the next. And if I may, for a minute, is that we're holistic beings. We're mental, we're emotional, we're physical, and we're spiritual. And at the end of life, it really seemed, because again, I work from a big pool that I can teach from, that as the physical body was diminishing, it was almost as if their spiritual body was growing. And there was one point in that journey that they have all this new awareness, like a new perspective. And so they would say the following, that there is no death, that we're all connected to one unconditional loving energy, that there's no judgment, and that everything that happened in their life, even the most painful things, were meant as an opportunity for growth. People were saying this who had lived a certain way with a certain religion that they practiced by, and it turned into more of a spiritual awareness. But if we're not paying attention to people at the end of life about what they want you to know, by the way, time is your greatest commodity, and we just don't know how much we have of it. We're doing something wrong if we're not paying attention to that wisdom, because they're not trying to sell you anything. And we can really talk about what makes a good death. And what really does make a good death is a good life, a fully lived life, not missing it. Because the regrets, and right now, statistically, death is the number one fear in the world. For my patients, it wasn't the fear necessarily of the death. It was that they got a time limit left and that they didn't use their life the way they know they were supposed to. So they were full of regret. They do not want us to miss on that. And that's really important.
So that completely aligns with when I was studying confidence. That's my favorite topic. And it talked so much about how the thing we regret most are the things that we don't do, the conversations we didn't have, the forgiveness we didn't give, the risks we didn't take, the dreams we didn't chase, all of those things. So I want to talk about the good death and what it tells us about life. But before I do, what are some of the top regrets that you heard people share on their deathbed?
You just said one of the major ones. And if people that listening to this podcast today take away one thing, it's forgiveness. I really want you to understand the transformational power of forgiveness for people at the end of life. Now, What happens at the end of life, I feel like, is everyone's stuff bubbles to the top. It's almost like it wants to be worked out. And when they get that higher perspective, they're able to look at situations that happened in their life with a different lens. And that lens affords them an ability to look at it for the opportunity of growth. And forgiveness is something that does take place there, and it literally transforms the person. So the minute I was seeing that, I said, wait a minute. And we all have it, it's called the human experience, right? We all have forgiveness to give and we all have forgiveness to receive. And I thought, if they could change their life at the end of life through the power of forgiveness, what do I need to look at? Am I carrying things? And so I really did an inventory. And by the way, it is the most transformative tool that we have in life, because when we're carrying things with us, it's like carrying backpacks with boulders in them. And it really prevents us, because everything is energy, and it prevents us from moving forward in those dreams, in that purpose, if we're blocked from holding on to resentment, holding on to guilt, holding on to, I wish I had. So forgiveness is one of the best tools you could ever use and it's for yourself, which is not always understood. It's not for the other person, it's for you. It literally frees you of energy being drained. And it's just amazing.
Couldn't agree more, and easier said than done. I think especially for those of us who may conceptually know that death is coming, but it doesn't feel imminent, right? When you know you only have a certain amount of time. So any tips on applying what we're bound to learn at the end stage of life to today?
Yeah. And it goes back to like your question again previously. I went off on forgiveness because it's such an important moment to understand. But when you're saying, what are the regrets? The regrets are, I wish I had not lived in fear. And when I mean lived in fear, I mean fear of stepping out of their comfort zone and really following their heart. And that's where the growth is, by the way. And so when we talk about that, so super important. So if I may invite your listeners to a little exercise, and I know this is a hard one, but just stay with me for a minute. If your life were to end tomorrow, what would be the major things you regret that you can think about? Oh, I didn't write that book. I didn't talk to my sister. I didn't do this. What is that? Because those are going to be your indicators of what to take action on now, because we don't want to get there. And so when I cleaned up my own and really got to what I wanted to do, never in my life did I think we'd have this international institute. It's not what was the main role. The main role was just following the heart to the next step. But I'll tell you that when you do, the journey takes on a magic and an essence that you can't find unless you step out of that small human space that we're in. So think about what you would regret now, those conversations, just like you said, the things that you'd want to do, and go do them.
I like that shift on focusing on what we'd regret. I think sometimes we think at the end of life, what would we do? And then you start thinking about, oh, I would move to this country and spend all of my money. And it's like, okay, but we can't live that way from day to day. We can't live as if this is our last day from that perspective.
Right.
But thinking about it from the lens of what would I regret most, that's something we can do something about today.
Absolutely. And that's what I did. So I was like, oh, and I wanted to try everything and travel everywhere and do whatever comes into my, the flow of my alignment, what I call that heart alignment. And it's just been a magical journey. So that's really important. And again, the people at the end of life, the number one thing that they say to me is, I thought I had more time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Take that away. We have to take that away, because we know that this journey is not going to be the same. And here's the thing, the people at the end of life, the beautiful, sacred, 100 years ago, we used to die at home. People cared for us. The skill of how to care for someone at the end of life was handed down generationally. We've been dying for thousands of years, by the way. We know how to do this. It's only in the last 100 that it got really medicalized and removed. And when we remove seeing something and the truth about it, a fear surrounds it. But if you go back into history, death used to be revered as a sacred rite of passage, just like birth, marriage, and death. And there are beautiful ritual and beautiful things that happen in that space that we need to know about, because it quells fear. And it also just may open you up to that there's a much bigger picture going on in this beautiful thing called life that we've been gifted.
That's really interesting. And I think it is very much a part of the fear or discomfort that I experience because you're right. I mean, again, I haven't done the research that you have or had the experiences that you have, but I feel like now when we think of death, we almost always think of hospitals and things that we can try to do to delay or prevent. And it feels cold and scary. And that's not to say that there haven't been some great medical advancements that help us live longer, and that's wonderful. But there is this sort of flip side of the coin that makes us inexperienced and disconnected from the power of the experience. Am I?
You're spot on. And this is what I want to say is that there's a very fine line between keeping people alive and living, where the quality is never going to be there and it can almost cause more discomfort. But I also want you to know this, and this is really important and why the book was written, is that hospice care, which is a beautiful model of care in theory, is our end-of-life provider in the United States. 98%, this is a survey by Medicare, 98% of the hands-on end-of-life care is done by family caregivers when they usually don't know the first thing about how to do that. You just said, I don't know. I haven't done the research. I haven't been there. The time to learn this is not when you're faced with it. That when we're frightened and we're in it, nothing. And I just go in as a hospice nurse and put Band-Aids on. So as a hospice nurse, I was making visits for 60 minutes once a week if that person was stable. The model doesn't work, but here's the great news, that death is not a medical experience, it's a human one. And we were doing this for thousands of years. And so this book and the trainings are bringing that back. And there's so many that are offered for free so that you have the tools. And by the way, there's threaded with beautiful stories. People have talked about it healing their grief from 20, 30 years ago, inspiring about life, like we say, get to it. So there's many beautiful things about stepping into this space.
You know how we're supposed to drink a bazillion ounces of water every day? Cute idea, but between work, life, and trying to remember what day it is, hydration doesn't always make the cut, which is why I love Cure. Cure hydration packs make it simple. Plant-based electrolytes, no added sugar, just 25 calories, and it hydrates better than water alone. And you know I love me some efficiency. My favorite flavor is lemonade. It's light, clean, and doesn't taste like somebody dumped a candy store into your water bottle. I use it on long recording days when I'm traveling or any day I hit noon and realize that I'm running purely on caffeine. And when I need more than hydration, like pre-workout where I need all the help I can get, I grab Cure Energy. It's got natural caffeine and electrolytes that get me moving and help me survive the part where I question all my life choices mid-workout. Staying hydrated isn't just about drinking water. You need electrolytes too. That's why I love Cure. It's clean, it tastes great, and it actually works. And for This Is Women's Work listeners, you can get 20% off your first order at curehydration.com/woman's work with code Woman's Work. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure to let them know that you heard about Cure right here. It really helps support the show. Don't just drink more water. Upgrade it with Cure.
How do you top your love for your cat? With a cascade of decadent, savory gravy over a mouth-watering mousse pâté. Fancy Feast gems. 2 gourmet pâtés in one convenient pack. Simply peel and plate to reveal a pyramid shape that makes eating delightful and pamper her with an experience as extraordinary as she is. Turn the everyday into the extraordinary with Fancy Feast gems.
Every Who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton, but where to get great prices on gifts, they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one Who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and low prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as Who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
Okay, so I want to take our conversation twofold. First, this idea of creating and experiencing a good death for ourselves and the people we love, basically teaching us some of the things maybe we knew 100 years ago that we don't know anymore today. And then the second part is what we can learn about living
Mhm.
Before I dive into that, let me just double check. The biggest regrets is around forgiveness and feeling like wishing we wouldn't have lived in fear. Are there any other regrets that we should know about?
Yeah, not forgiving people, not letting people love you fully, not loving other people fully. And I feel like all of this is in that nucleus of living in fear and unforgiveness. I really do. Because when we're hurt, it's almost like prison walls. Like prison walls get, and we have this is called the human experience. This is what people have told me is that we go through these trials and tribulations and also beautiful moments to evolve, to experience, to grow, to expand. And if we keep making a wall every time we get hurt and shutting down what I want, shutting down what is in my heart because I don't want to get hurt again, we miss the whole entire journey.
Okay.
And forgiveness is the tool to remove that. Yeah.
So, what do we need to know that we don't know anymore about how to have a good death?
Live life each day like one little lifetime. And that's my wisdom. And that's what I do. Because if I know that one day the journey will not be the same, I don't know when that day will be. I want to make sure that I don't miss today. And that means just making sure I connect to gratitude, to presence, to the awe and wonder of this experience, right? And then also, how can I show up to be of service? Where's that calling me? Because I will tell you, I believe that everyone is here for a reason and everyone has a gift to share. And that's, I think, what people, again, the regret is, oh, I had this impulse of I was supposed to be an artist or a florist or whatever that was, and we didn't live that. And when you follow, and it might not make analytical sense, it usually doesn't, but when you follow that guided, what I call guided inspiration and take action, it's almost like breathing for the first time. So if you follow your heart, what you want to, connect with your gift, but then make sure each day you're in presence, you're being thankful. You stop and smell the roses and what's around you. When that day comes, hopefully we can all say, okay.
And in your experience, you mentioned that you have experienced some good deaths.
Mhm.
Is that the sort of commonality that they have, that they lived a good life, that they didn't have a ton of these regrets, that they didn't have a ton of forgiveness they still had yet to give or
That was
receive?
it. That was it, Nicole. So when I first was witnessing a good death, it was like, I was like, okay, what made that? Because everything is not going well. What made that? And it was number one, that the awareness that one day their journey would not be the same as it is today, and that they didn't have a lot of stuff to unpack. So that was critically important. And then to add for you what makes a good death, and I think this is another thing that I call it a doula giver's pearl, if your listeners can take away, understanding what quality of life means to me. And so what makes that day, that one little lifetime day, have joy? And when that's not attainable anymore, maybe I can't speak to my loved ones or recognize them or do anything for myself, that would be the benchmark where I wouldn't want extensive measures to be taken to keep me alive. And then deciding for myself, yes, I would like to be home. I'd like to be surrounded by my pets. I'd like to have warm blankets, please. I'd like my pain to be no higher than a 2 or a 3 if possible. I'd like chocolate ice cream all day for my meals. Like, this is super important. And then thinking again about, how you'd like to be celebrated. There are lots of choices that we have. And it's really important that we choose that. When you do, by the way, it's one of the greatest gifts you can give your family, because this is so hard for them already. And if you give them a blueprint and a roadmap how to support you, it makes that experience almost 100 times easier.
And I wonder how many of us have that for ourselves or the people in our lives today. Like, I think of if you have living parents or a spouse or a best friend or for yourself, has this been communicated? Are you having this conversation? I'm going to guess the answer is no for most of us.
It is. So statistically, 23% of people, they say, have done what's called an advance directive. That's a document where you put your wishes, but only half of those people even know where they are. So it's not something. And again, back to, your comment, and it's correct. Have we maybe unknowingly created this huge fear around death with the verbiage we use as medical professionals? He lost his battle with cancer. You have to fight. You have to fight. And have we set up an impossible thing to win, because we know if it's a battle, no matter how much we prolong it, it's never going to be something that we can outrun. By the way, you shouldn't have to.
Mhm.
It is a sacred experience. I think bringing back that awareness, I think bringing back the sacred awareness of death brings back the sacred awareness of life. And I think that's how we change the world.
You said several things in there, but I think this is such an important conversation to have. So, what might be some examples we ask ourselves or our loved ones? Is it about pain tolerance? Is it about quality of life? What does that mean? What are some of the most important questions we ask so that
Yep.
we can be aware? Because you're right. I think for many of us, it's the question is, what would this person want? And
Yes.
we will feel better, obviously not happy. It's still, their grief is
Mhm.
still there, but I think we'll feel better if we know that we are delivering on what this person would want. And without a conversation, we're just best guessing. So, what questions should we be asking?
Okay. So you want to ask this question, Mom, if you're at a point where your quality of life cannot be improved, so there's no reversing a disease process, where would that be? Where would that benchmark be? And then on top of that, so pick that. What's important to you? You want to give the person back control. So you want, for something that seems like the person is, I don't want to talk about it, it's like a loss of control and all that. Give them back control. So say, what's important to you? What makes your day? And so for my mom, it's playing bridge and talking to her friends and going to lunch. And if she weren't able to do any of those things, that would be that her quality of life wasn't there, where she wouldn't want extensive measures. Then let's flip that and say, now what do you want? How comfortable do you want to be? Where would you like to be cared for? What's important to you? The shows that you want to watch, the music that you want played, visitors, all of the things that you can layer there that you really want to tailor it. There is a list that we have. So when you share with your listeners some show notes, we have a lot of free things that are, one is called the 9-question document. That's a free document that you want to ask your question. These are the 9 questions that I have heard repeatedly that in completion will allow for a good death if you ask your loved one these 9 questions. Where do you want to be? How do you want to be treated? What's important with the conversations? How do you want your ceremony to be? How do you want to be celebrated in your life? Those kind of things. It's all there. And that's really, really important. And get it in writing.
Yes. Okay. That makes sense, especially if you've got siblings or other family members involved, right?
Yeah, because fear has a really weird way of like letting us hear something different than somebody else did, depending the same conversation. Have the conversation if you can in a group setting with your family and loved ones, have brownies and cookies and all of that yummy stuff, and then put it in a document so that it's crystal clear. Because when it does show up, sometimes it's really, a moment that you want to revert back and say, okay. And the most loving thing we can do, Nicole, is to support mom and what she would want, even if it's different what I would want. And that gives me a tool and a roadmap to say, I'm doing something to help mom. This is the best thing I could do at this moment. It could also be the hardest thing.
Yeah. And that was exactly going to be my follow up question I had too, which is what do we do when what, the person wants goes against what we would want or our beliefs or something like that. And I think you answered it, which is ultimately this is their experience and we get to honor that. And then the second thing is what to do when someone is unwilling to have the conversation. If you bring it up with a parent or spouse and they're like, oh, that's too dark, or I don't want to talk about it or whatever, any advice about how to help them be more open to the conversation?
Yeah. First of all, I think you need to meet people where they are. So maybe that first time that you're attempting that conversation, they're like, oh, hold on. And then you're like, okay, but this is really important. And then what I would say is to come back and say, Mom, we love you so much. And we want to make sure that we have everything that you want to make sure that you're comfortable and that everything to uphold that. And so if you even just ask her, where would she want to be cared for? If there's no reversing a treatment and comfort, bring in all those things, even if you get that one done. But if you can say to her, it's one of the greatest things for you also, exactly what to do to honor her wishes because you love her so much. Usually people will step into that space after that initial sometimes shock.
Mm-hmm.
Which it might be at the beginning. And a lot of people do sometimes say that. I've had a lot of older people say that their adult children shut them down from having the conversation, that they want to talk about it. And the children are like, Mom, don't say that. It's not going to happen. And it's like, Stop. But I would like to share an interesting bedside story, if I may,
Please.
from this so that people can really be invited into this space of what I have been privileged and honored to see and why I'm not afraid of death and why this is so important. In the oncology unit, there was a woman who came in. She had gallbladder cancer. She was being treated with chemotherapy. It had brittled her bones to the point that she fractured her hip. So I was working a Friday, Saturday, Sunday shift, and she came in on Friday, her and her sister. She was about 46 years old. Everyone really panicked, of course. And I knew building the trust was really important for them right away. And then by the end of Saturday's shift, I moved her from a bedside commode back to her bed, and she was short of breath. And that was a new finding. So we both sort of knew in that moment that something was happening, but really didn't know what. It turns out that night they did testing and she had a blood clot that had broken off and went to her lung, and she had a pulmonary emboli, which is not a good thing. By Sunday, the end of Sunday, she was breathing heavy. And I remember walking into the hospital room with the doctor to do rounds. And this woman said to the doctor, "I just want to thank you for everything you've done for me." And I turned to look at the doctor's face, and tears were going down her face. This woman, Maureen, was essentially telling the doctor she was going to die. And that night, the doctor, of course, was out of her mind wanting to fix this, and there's nothing they could do at that point. That night, they said that Maureen woke up from a nap at about 11 o'clock and said, "Get my sister, I'm transitioning," with like all the excitement that you would have told an 8-year-old child you're going to Disney World. Her sister comes into the room and she goes, "I'm transitioning." And I don't even know if I knew that term back in that day. So this is what I want to say. What did she see and what did she know that completely not only removed her fear, but made her excited about that next chapter? And this is just one of the examples. There are so many beautiful moments that people talk about, seeing loved ones at the end of life, being connected to encompassing love, that have we removed one of the greatest teachers about life? And is our fear of death completely unfounded?
Yeah. Powerful story and invitation, I think, for all of us to, I don't know if reframe, it seems like a silly word, but just really to reestablish our relationship with what death might be, what it could be. And also, I think what I'm hearing that we didn't say directly is there is this sort of communal, collaborative
Mhm.
component of it. I'm guessing nobody you've sat by has wanted to die alone. I would imagine that's something we all want is the people we love and the people who we've lived with to be around us. Is that fair?
It is fair. It's a sacred experience. And when you're in that, it's so interesting because when you're in that space, sometimes there's just such a feeling of connectedness and love and something so much greater. And time, as you and I know it, sometimes feels like it disappears. So it is a communal event. It's a loving event. And one of the things that I really share with people is, not to rush that moment, to take that in, because right now we have traumatic grief that we're dealing with. And why we have traumatic grief is because we have no knowledge of this thing called end of life, which, by the way, is talking about life. So when it does show up, it's a crisis usually and goes very fast. And then people are stuck in this moment. And if they don't know, they have the funeral home come and the person's gone. They don't even know what just happened. We have to
Mhm.
slow all this down for really help bringing back ritual in the natural way. And by the way, it teaches you everything you need to know about how to live. And that leads to the good end of life.
Also, it sounds like, yes, death happens in a moment, but for those left behind, for the grieving who are still living, there is an ongoing element of it, end of life services, celebrations, what these people would want. I also, for whatever reason, thought of like the passing down of things, the financial aspect, and because I've seen a lot of siblings get completely torn up over
Mhm.
those types of things. Should that be part of the conversation of what a good death looks like for each person?
Absolutely. And that's something for you and me to do now. So this is something that I need, and this is my responsibility to think about. It's my responsibility to think about quality of life to me, where I'd like to be, what that looks like. Then for my items that I have, where those passwords are allocated, where deeds to houses are. I have a peace of mind planner that has everything for everyone if they want to go through the 5 categories. All the things we don't think about, because right now, if we pretend it's optional, it shows up, and families are usually thrust into the next phase of it, which is a scavenger hunt, which is so much stress. And they usually end up fighting, and it can be just awful. And so avoid that. But this is my responsibility. So I have love notes in there that sometimes, you'll have that great day that you're thinking about a family member, some magic moment, writing that down and just putting that in my box that they're going to get at the end with everything there.
I love that.
Yeah, but it really does have all the practical things as well that we don't think about. Again, your Facebook password. I mean, things that they need to know about, and where you want things to go and who you want them to go to. So there's no fighting over it.
Right. It feels like more often than not, it's the women who get called on parents, siblings, even like in-laws, right? The end of life experience, and what we can do to invite men into this conversation, and what, if there's anything as women we kind of need to protect ourselves from, because it can sometimes be too much.
Because we have this aging population, there's a silver tsunami. It's women that are showing up. Their mothers, their wives, they're working. Now they're taking care of, the aging and end of life, and it's not okay. So yes, it's okay because we want to show up, but it's not okay that they do it alone. It's really important that we have support, that people know I need to say, I need help. And that's a strength. It's not a weakness. And also, if you're in that dynamic, sir, you need to say, how can I support you? Even if I can't physically do it, can I pay for some help? Like, we really do need to get on the page.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Because women are killing themselves trying to fit this role, and it's not okay. It should never be this way.
Right. My last question is, any final advice, or maybe a reiteration of advice you've already given, of how we can shift from radical avoidance to radical acceptance of our own mortality and death?
Yes. I want you to take a deep breath, and that's always a good thing, right? Take a deep breath, let it out. And I want you to take this in. I think we simply just forgot that death is not a medical experience. It's a human one, and it's a holistic one. And here's the thing. It can go well, really, really well, with the right education, kindness, and support.
Suzanne, thank you for an incredible conversation, for your brave and wildly important work. I know more people are going to want to learn about this work. So the book, again, is called The Good Death, available on Amazon or wherever it is that you buy books. Let's keep our local bookstores in business. And you can also go to the website, thegooddeathbook.com. We'll put that and all other information, including links to free resources that Suzanne mentioned, in show notes. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Nicole, thank you so much. You have an amazing podcast. I'm so glad that you're doing this.
Because of conversations like this. So thanks. Okay, friend, as we wrap up this episode, I want to invite you to have the conversations that we so often avoid, the ones with the people you love, about what a good death means to them, what it looks and feels like, so that you can show up for them in the best way possible when the time comes. And while you're at it, give yourself the same gift today, because it's the only day that's guaranteed. Ask yourself, what would I regret most? What's missing? Or what would I need to do to feel like I'm truly living my life fully? Take those answers seriously, because they hold the key to a life where things that matter don't go undone, unsaid, or unloved. Death is part of woman's work because it's part of the human experience. And my deepest wish for you is both a fully lived life and also a good death. This is woman's work.
Every minute your finance team spends wrestling with data is a minute lost. Insight Software's AI-powered insights instantly move you from complexity to clarity. Automated analysis, real-time reporting, strategic recommendations, all at your fingertips. Transform how your finance team works and watch your business grow. Stop wasting time. Start making smarter decisions. Learn more at insightsoftware.com/AI.
You know the words that dominate our news cycle.
Private equity keeps inventing
generative artificial intelligence.
Tax on home.
America's chip fueled by market volatility.
Bets on Fed rate individual stocks.
But do you truly understand how they impact your world and your wallet? In a world that skims the what, understand the why. Because context changes everything. Subscribe to learn more at Bloomberg.com, the global benchmark for business news.